Welcome to the Social Work Rants podcast, providing a platform for social workers to share their stories. The podcast covers a wide range of topics, including mental health, social justice, policy, and the day to day realities of the profession. Season 10 will continue to focus on the intersectionality of mental health and finances. Hope you enjoy. Hello, social workers, mental health professionals, and change agents. Welcome to another episode of season 10 of the Social Work Rants podcast. I'm your host, Bas Moreno. Saludos a todos. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in wherever you are watching or listening to the podcast. I appreciate all the love and support. Gracias a todos por su apoyo. Continue to follow the podcast on Instagram at the Social Work Rants podcast. That is all one word. On Twitter X at Social Work Rants, and Facebook, type in the Social Work Rants podcast, hit that like button, download episodes however you listen to the podcast, share episodes, and of course hit that red subscribe button on the YouTube. Long time coming. I feel like we've been planning this for like two years almost.
A very long time.
I'm glad we able to make this happen. Luisa Lopez, if you don't know who this person is, you're doing yourself a tremendous disservice in the social work field. This is a superstar right here.
I
How
don't know
you
about
doing?
I don't know about all that. But I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. I've been following your work for a long time, and I've been saying that I'm going to come on the podcast for a really long time, but life kept getting in the way. But today we stopped life in its tracks, and here I am. So glad to be here.
No, no, glad to have you, and been following you for a while as well. And you're doing tremendous work in my forever state of New York, and dealing with everything that's happening and has been happening, continues to happen.
Yeah.
uh, I wanted to give you your flowers regarding, because I had a recently. We were both at the Somos conference that took place, and I never, like, I heard of it like just online, but not knowing the ins and outs of what that conference entails until like we spoke at the dinner, that next dinner, like the Christmas dinner that we had a couple years back, and mentioned that, and following following along, and on the email list I saw like the call for proposals, and like, screw it. I applied and was shocked that I got the email.
That shocked. You're amazing.
But I was legit shocked, and was like, let's do a panel. It was like, oh, that's even better than less of the work. And it came out great. So thank you for this. That's what you gotta, I always talk about networking and the importance of networking, because good opportunities happen, and not gatekeeping. And I live at a state where it's a lot of gatekeeping. So,
Mhm, mhm.
so I appreciate it. Thank you.
For sure, for sure. It's my pleasure. And it was really great to see you at Somos. It's always great for me to see social workers in spaces where you normally would not find social workers, and social workers talking about things that you wouldn't normally think social workers are knowledgeable or able to speak about. So hearing you talk about financial planning and building financial legacy for yourself, for your family, for your children, was really impactful and really powerful. I really enjoyed your panel, and I think you did so well. And if they're smart, they will keep asking you back.
Who knows? It's PR later this year, and I heard DR too. So like,
I don't know nothing about that.
I'll be open to go back if the opportunity presents itself. But anyway, so yeah, you mentioned just being in spaces we not normally in, which is why I go to like financial conferences out of state, or if I can, or just be out there and just promote social work, and like, hey, like, we out here, we got to be in spaces we're not normally in. And I talk about, generally speaking, those we're not going to be wealthy doing social work, so we got to be in other rooms and meet other people, and like, we're not normally in, so we have to.
Hmm. For sure.
So for those who don't know who you are and what you do in our space, that the people about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, as Bas said, my name is Luisa Lopez. I serve as the executive director of the Latino Social Work Coalition and Scholarship Fund, which is an organization that for the past 24 years has been working to increase the number of Latino and bilingual social workers in working in our communities. Um, We've been highlighting the critical shortage of culturally competent and linguistically competent social workers that work in the community, most vulnerable communities across New York State, really across the country. So we have been doing that work, and the way that we do that is through our scholarship foundation. We award scholarships to Latino and bilingual social work students that are getting their masters in social work with an intention of going and working in vulnerable communities. We also offer professional development, networking, leadership development, mentorship. We have a free 1 year mentorship program for all of our scholarship recipients where they get to connect with and learn from leaders in the field and outside of the field as well. So that they can really build up those leadership muscles, those advocacy muscles, and really determine how they're going to use all of this very expensive education that they're
Mm-hmm.
getting in social work school to the betterment of our communities. We also have a very robust legislative advocacy portfolio where we advocate for things like the Social Work Workforce Act here in New York State and more equitable access to the profession so that we can finally not have a shortage of social workers that are qualified to work in the communities that need them. So that's really what the coalition does. I started out as an intern of the coalition. I was a scholarship recipient. I was a consultant for a while. I was a junior board member. I was a member of the board of directors eventually. And last year I became executive director, and it was really just the culmination of many years of work and dedication and passion for ensuring that the social work profession and that social workers reflect the communities that they work in, right? It's really important that it's really important to me, but it's really important, I think, for the quality of services that we provide, that social workers reflect the communities that they work in. So that is the work of the coalition. I'm proud to do it. I'm proud to do it with a wonderful team. And with a we've been successful. We continue to work and hope to continue to be even more successful in the future.
What is a kind of day in day out? I'm sure every day is a different day for you, but what does that role entail in being executive director of the coalition?
Sure. So, it's very busy. There is no downtime because our profession, human services, social services, there's no time when it ends. Uh, communities need our support, and they need our support always, right? So the work of the coalition really there is no downtime on it. My day to day, really, now that we have such robust activity with our legislative advocacy, really revolves around the legislative calendar here in New York State. We have this bill together with Social Workers for Justice, where we're advocating for the elimination of the entry-level licensing exam for social workers. So advocating for that really does take up a big chunk of my time. Um, but also just, the logistics of the day-to-day of the coalition are really demanding on my time as well. So, managing our social work program, everything from the implementation of our application to the review of that, selecting scholarship awardees, building the curriculum development of the scholarship and mentorship program, administering that, with the partnership of our social work schools, takes up a lot of time. We have a pretty robust calendar of networking and coalition building, community building activities and events. So, ensuring that social workers across New York State are connecting with each other, are collaborating with each other, are building their own networks in order to better serve our communities. So that takes up a lot of time as well. And then, just the day to day, every executive director has a ton of paperwork that they got to get through at the end the end of the day. But I will say that some of my favorite work is really being out there in the community and connecting with social workers on the ground, listening to their narratives, listening to what they're going through. And what I constantly hear, whether I go to a community-based organization here in the Bronx or I go to a community-based organization in upstate New York, what I constantly hear from the director on down is that there aren't enough social workers, which just reinforces to me why my work is so important. We need to make more social workers. We need to get
Mm,
more people into this profession, and we need to eliminate all of these arbitrary barriers for them to do so. So that's why things like the Social Work Workforce Act take up so much of my energy because I know how important it is. Every day I'm talking to people that tell me, I have this job, I'm willing to pay, I'm willing to provide professional development, I'm willing to do this, I'm willing to do that. And there is not one social worker that's qualified to take this job. That's really sad because that's a community that's going
mm.
without the social worker, without the social work workforce that it needs in order to grow and thrive.
Um, what that act? What you mentioned about the examination, the ending or potential ending of the examination, at least on the LM for
Mhm.
lack of better letters to use. What how how did that come about, and what's the status current status as of this recording?
Sure. So the Social Work Workforce Act came about, we've been working on it for 2 years now. Came about because of what I said before. We've been highlighting the critical shortage of social workers for many, many years, and we haven't been the only ones, right? Um, Organizations across the country have been highlighting what they're seeing in their states. Well, for 24 years, we've been asking for data from ASWB, which is the
Mm,
organization that administers the exam. They never wanted to give up the data until 2022 when they finally did, and lo and behold, we were correct. Uh, the disparities within the licensing system are enormous. The ASWB exam for the entry level, um, the M, which is the first step in becoming a licensed social worker, has barriers that disproportionately affect Black, Latino, and bilingual social workers, and also social workers of a certain age. But
mm,
but less is said about those disparities. The data from ASWB itself showed that the pass rates for people of color are significantly lower for white test takers, even when they have the same education and training. What does that mean? That means that fewer social workers of color are making it into the workforce, despite the fact that our communities need us the most. Um, the bill itself would remove the exam requirement for entry-level licensure in New York State. So basically, it's a strike through bill. It's very simple. We just want to remove the exam that leads to licensure. Everything else stays the same. We're not trying to get rid of licensure. You still need to be licensed, right? Licensure protects the social worker and protects the client. So we still want to be licensed. You still
mm,
have to apply for licensure. So New York State still gets its coins. You still have to pay the money in order to get licensed.
mm,
You still have to prove character and fitness, and you still have to do the mandated reporter. But most importantly, you still have to graduate from an accredited social work program and do your internship hours. So we're changing nothing except removing this entry-level licensing exam, which is already proven to not be an adequate measure of competency in social work. And I want to say something clearly too. We're not trying to get rid of the clinical exam. Okay, there's a lot of concern that we want everybody to be licensed. We want everybody to be a psychotherapist. We don't want any of that. So if you are interested in direct service and you want to go and be a private practitioner, you still have to pass your clinical exam. You still need to get your supervision hours in. We're not trying to touch that. That is there for a reason. We can leave that alone. But for entry-level social workers, when you still have to be supervised by a supervisor, you still have to do all of these hours of internship. We do more hours of internship than psychologists do. That's insanity.
Yeah, it is.
You still have to jump through all of these hurdles
Mm,
that I mentioned before in order to be a licensed social worker. This exam proves nothing other than it just being an arbitrary barrier to the workforce.
I'm definitely a testament of that, and make no bones of.
How many times did you take the exam?
I think like five.
Yeah,
I,
5. Mm,
I bombed the first time, then like next three I come within like points, within like
mm,
5 points
mm.
of taking it. So
And this is what we're seeing. It's really disturbing when you hear the advice that social workers get before they go into the exam. Well, don't answer the exam the way you would normally answer it. Answer the questions as if you were a white social worker in
mm,
rural America. We've all heard that, right? That is
mm,
incredibly alarming because the social work practice that you're going to put in place in a community in the South Bronx or in a community, in Brownsville or in
mm,
rural areas of New York State, you're not going to use the same techniques that they use out in middle America. You're just not. It's a completely different demographic. And
mm,
the example that I always use, is if you're doing a home visit, you're a home visitor with a program, and there seems to be, tension in the household or someone is yelling or something. The exam will tell you that you need to escalate and call the police. That is the opposite of what we would do in
right.
our communities. That is the
Mm,
opposite of what we would do in over-policed communities, right?
mm, mm,
So that in and of itself shows how little of a measure, how not good of a measure this exam is to
mm.
test social work competency, and we need to do away with it.
No, I agree that I always use the uh, a curse word in front of the ASWB. I try to be nice for once, but like no,
And they
I
make
can't
so much
stand.
money.
Oh, of
And
course.
and they make most of their money off of repeat test takers.
Mm,
They're not making money off of the one and done people that are
mm,
happen to be good test takers or are of a certain demographic. That's it. Those people pay their money and ASWB never has to deal with them again until they have to take their clinical exam if that's what they want to do. They're making all of their millions of dollars off of the people like you who took the test one, two, three, four, 5 times and didn't pass.
yeah, it was like right place, right time when I moved to Delaware, and they still had the grandfathering in. And I'm like what? A good thing my coworker who I didn't even like meet yet, and she was like, called me on the phone. Was like, hey, like, you could take the, you got to get your license. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I thought I got the job so that I didn't have to get licensed. And like, no, you just pay the fee. And like, how much? I'm like, I'll give you my whole my whole savings account if I don't have to take that ASWB exam. And like
And
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 did it, and it was like, like I don't have to deal with the ASWB anymore.
and we are hardly the first, state to want to do this. 17 states have already eliminated
Mm,
the exam or have never required the exam. So we're actually behind, which, I'm a native New Yorker. That's actually really embarrassing to me that we're not leading on this. Other states are moving in this direction because they see that requiring this exam is hurting the profession. And we're
mm,
not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about real people who have been working in the field, who are doing the job, but can't get licensed because of a test that doesn't actually measure their skills. In Illinois, when they eliminated the exam within 2 years, they added 10,000 new social workers to the workforce. Now we are in the middle of a mental health crisis. I don't know if anybody's been looking around, but all you got to do is walk down the street or take the train or
mm.
take the bus or turn on the news. We're in the middle of a mental health crisis, and we need social workers are the front lines of addressing that, not the police, not the politicians, social workers.
No, absolutely. I always put like us in front of police, fireman, EMT. Like, no, we out there, we out there. So,
Well,
so I got, I got.
I don't know about the fireman piece because I'm not running into no buildings. I'm not running into no fire,
Okay,
into a building that's on fire.
maybe no fire on the different level. But my point is like we out in the front line. Shoe. I got bone spurs in my feet and two herniated discs in my back. That's proof of being out in New York. All over New York for years and doing home visits and all this, going to Rikers and just everywhere in New York, seeing clients where they're at and living in Jersey on top of that and traveling to New York so for work. So it's I put in that time. So definitely would just the exam is it works my nerves with a passion that over $1,000 that I'm never going to see
Mhm.
and which is I always like nope, not anymore. Like, you can't. That's why, like, I'm not in the process of my career to get a C. I'm not interested in doing face to face work, at least on the clinical side. That needing my C, I could do any therapeutic work without my C, and what I'm doing now with my business. So like, but ASWB kick rocks.
Not kick rocks.
But yeah, so how can that bill get passed? Like what's the status within the state?
So, right now the bill is in both higher ed committees of the Assembly and the Senate. We have a lot of momentum now. We have the support of NAMI, New York City, New York State, NASW, New York City, New York State, NASW National, and many other organizations are coming on board. So right now we're just getting as much support as we can, and convincing these committee chairs of the higher ed committee and the Senate higher ed committee to calendar the bill for a hearing where we can lay our case, and really demonstrate how not passing this bill is incredibly harmful to communities across the state. So that's where we at legislatively. In order to go forward, it needs to get out of the committee. So right now we're still in committee, but we are hopeful, and we have a lot of momentum, and we hope that it will get through both chambers this legislative session
When does that legislative session ends for people?
in the summer, in June.
Okay, so realistically, if it were to pass, we're looking at 2026.
Well, it's a strike through bill. So, it's not a bill that has any money attached to it. It's not an overly complicated bill. It's the kind of thing that if the state wanted to implement that, tomorrow, they could. And they
Mm,
did. They did pause licensing during the COVID pandemic because we were in a crisis. Uh,
mm.
and I would argue that we are in a crisis again, only it's a mental health crisis. And it's a little bit more nuanced, but the premise is the same. We need the social work workforce in order to address it. So eliminate this barrier that's in the way of creating the workforce that's actually going to tackle the problem head on.
That true. I argue we were already in a mental health crisis, and then COVID came and took it
And
to
made it
another
worse. No, you're
made it worse,
100%.
and on top of the opioid
No.
crisis that already was in existence and continues to be in existence, and there's just a whole lot of dominoes that we need the workforce.
Yeah, and it's a snowball effect, right?
Mm,
You're right to mention the opioid crisis because what we're seeing now is, the mental health crisis has compounded and it's made up of the opioid crisis, homelessness, uh, um, extreme poverty. Um, all of these things are kind of uh just compounding and snowballing, and it's really playing out in the streets, it's playing out in the train stations, it's playing out in vulnerable communities that don't have the supports that wealthier communities have. And it's a no-brainer to me. It's a no-brainer to me that we would just empower more people with the ability to hire culturally competent, linguistically competent social workers, and to give them the work that needs to be done. We're not going to be able to police our way out of the extreme crisis that's playing out in the street. You're not going to be able to do it. And that's also not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to get social workers to do that work.
exactly, especially the police department in New York came with so much corruption and I think they had like at least like 3 or 4 police commissioners in the last 5 years.
I don't know, man. I don't know. No, but I think that there is something to be said for I think that there is something to be said for uh social work students. I'm
Mm,
always in awe and so impressed with social work students that see what's going on in the world and they still choose to be part of this field, to want to join this profession, because it can be frightening. Particularly if you are a social worker that wants to work in vulnerable communities that need a lot of support,
mm,
because the crisis is just compounding. It's not getting any better. And I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to want to be a social worker today. It's not that it's ever been an easy profession,
mm.
but things are markedly worse, I think, now for vulnerable communities than they have been in a while. And particularly young people, young social workers, to still want to go in and do that work, I think it's remarkable and shows so much courage that, I mean, I love it. I get teary-eyed because it's the students that apply to our scholarship program. They have
Mm,
to make a commitment that they're going to go back and work in communities that need them. That's a hard thing to do when you're not
mm,
sure where you're going, what you want to do.
mm.
But to have the strength and just the foresight to say, I have a skill set, I'm bilingual. I am culturally humble enough to understand what it's like to work in these communities, and I want to go back. I think that's remarkable and commendable.
No, absolutely, and I meet younger social workers from time to time, and they they out there. They want to be in it doing the work. I mean, I see it more when I go back home to New York than see it down here, but where I live at. But I definitely see it, and the hunger's there, the passion's there, and just willing to help folks out. And yes, we got so many things going on, currently, and the administration is not making it any easier. It's only going to make our roles in social work just that much harder, and which is why I post what I post regarding social workers who or just general people who voted for this man back in office, which everything that he did and still won the election, and just I still don't get it from time to time, and it's just literally every day he's doing something crazy that's going to affect us uh, immediately, and then like down the line, 2, 3, 4 years down the line.
And that's part of the work of Latino Social Work Coalition and our partnership with Social Workers for Justice as well. We this is not the this is social work month. We're in social work month, but this is not a regular social work month. What's happening at the federal level is very quickly we're already seeing trickling down to the local level in terms of how it affects vulnerable communities, communities of color. So, social workers have to really step up now and lead this work. And that's why this partnership that we have with Social Workers for Justice is so impactful. Not just with this legislation, but really supporting social workers in seeing themselves beyond the direct practice dynamic. We are a profession that prides itself, I think, on being collegial, on being collaborative, on working well with others. That's the kind of um, framing that our social work education prepares us for, and how we enter professional spaces. But I think some of that really handcuffs us too when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to things like taking action against things like executive orders as we're seeing in that are coming down from the federal level. And what is our role in protecting communities with what we know and with the skills that we learned? So, part of the work is creating more social workers, encouraging and creating the space for more social workers to do the work, but also stepping into this role of advocate, right? Which is a lot of
Mm-hmm.
what the Latino Social Work Coalition and Social Workers for Justice does um, in creating spaces where social workers can really advocate for their communities. It's part of our code of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
The part of the code of ethics that nobody ever wants to talk about is that we have a responsibility to advocate on behalf of communities. What's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. There's not a lot of gray area there, at least in my view. So we have a personal responsibility and an ethical responsibility to step up. And now is the moment to step up. If there was ever a moment, the moment is now.
Mm-hmm.
And advocate for systemic changes that are going to impact the communities that we serve.
No, absolutely. That definitely the time is now. If it's not now, then it's never. It's almost like never happening. It's just a whole lot, and obviously we, part of the code of ethics is practice, our self care. That we can do the work, but at the same time, we got to take care of ourselves too. It's just almost too much, and purposely the administrations, they throwing all this stuff at you to get you confused, to get you overwhelmed, that to a point that they want you to stop, and we can't stop. So we got to keep pushing, and at the same time, you got to find that balance. Whatever works for you to do, and just yeah, we have to be in this moment, and and only hope for the best.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know. Self-care is simultaneously super important, but also non-existent. I mean, I think um I think people have to pick what the fight for them is going to be.
Mm,
If if you work with immigrant communities, then figure out what does fighting back look like within that work for you. If you work with survivors of interpersonal violence, then figure out what does fighting back look like for you within that work. If you're a school social worker, how do you protect your students in this time that that they may be vulnerable, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on what hat it is that you wear, figure out what fighting back looks like in your space, and then do that. But also make time to find your rest, to find your safe spaces, to find your community. that will uplift you and hold you and support you. What we cannot do is, what you said earlier, where we're getting constantly this barrage, this notifications from CNN and executive order this and executive order that and executive order this and the Department of Education and the CIA and John F. Kennedy and RF Kennedy and the vaccine. That's by design. So we
Mm-hmm.
have to be smarter and pick our lane. And this is where I'm going to fight. And this is where I'm going to lay down and let somebody else, fight. And find the community, nothing good happens in isolation. So find the people that are doing the work kind of along the same lines that you are and find your community there. And then if some other people are working on something else and fighting on something else, then let them. But if you take on every single battle, you're never going to win the war. And if you try to win every single battle, you're never going to win the war, and you're just going to exhaust yourself and you're going to burn yourself out, and we're going to lose you when we need you the most.
It's funny you mentioned that. Isn't that what almost sounds like what dem current Democrats are getting blamed for? That they trying to fight everything and not getting a whole lot of nothing done.
I don't know. I only know the strategy that works for me. But this is a perfect example, that's we're all looking at um, what are the political parties doing or not doing, and we all have opinions about that and all of that. And all of that is very important and should be talked about and should be discussed and dissected. And um, people need to have a coming to the Lord about whatever it is that they believe. But that's not my fight. My fight is we need to make more social workers. We need to prepare more social workers. We need to encourage more social workers. And we need to give these people the tools that they need in order to do their job and do it well, because now is the moment for that.
Speaking of politicians, what was it like working with politicians in the assembly in New York?
So I've worked with elected officials at various levels. My first job out of social work school was working for then Congressman Jose Serrano out of the Bronx, he was at the time the congressman for the South Bronx. And I was working in his DC office as a policy fellow, and that was really just it was a really interesting experience for me to see the legislative process at the federal level up close, and to kind of learn the ins and outs of appropriations and kind of, how the sausage gets made in terms of, you know, uh, which communities get what in terms of funding and resources, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a really interesting and powerful experience for me, particularly to see things from a social work perspective, where, in my happiest hopes and dreams, like every community would get the same amount of money for everything,
Mm-hmm.
schools, for streets, for hospitals, for all of this stuff, and that's just not the way that it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really impactful experience. I came back to New York and I started working for then Borough President Gail Brewer, and she, I mean, to this day, I think it's been the most impactful professional experience that I've had, working for someone who I don't consider her to be a politician. She is an elected official through and through, working for her community, working tirelessly for her community, and really listening to the different voices, that the different leaders, and taking into account people's perspectives. A lot of You would think that they do, but a lot of elected officials don't do that. They come in, they have an agenda, they're going to do what they're going to do, and whoever doesn't like it can go kick rocks.
Mm-hmm.
That was not the leadership that I saw when I was working for that office. It was very deliberate, considered, measured leadership that I hope to emulate in everything that I do. Um, because I I don't think you can be a good leader if you don't listen to the people whose who's going to be impacted by your decision making. And now think about this. She was the Manhattan Borough President. Manhattan is a very big place.
Mm-hmm.
If if you're sitting down and you're listening to all of the different voices and stakeholders that go into any given project, that's a lot of listening, which I think is the hallmark of a great elected official. More listening, less talking, right?
Absolutely.
Um, and we don't see a lot of that these days. We hear a lot of talking
Yes.
and not enough listening. And and then I worked at the city council for a little bit. So, it's been interesting to me to often be the only social worker in those spaces. But it's been very gratifying too, because I can bring that strengths-based
Mm-hmm.
uh, perspective, that worldview into conversations that wouldn't normally have the benefit of having a social worker. And it's also just solidified for me how important it is what we do with the scholarship and mentorship program, where, for a lot of the students that come through our program, when they hear my story about how I went straight from social work school to working in government, they're like, "Oh my God, you can do that?" Like, you you can do that? I'm like, absolutely, you can do that. And absolutely, you should do that because you, I promise, will be bringing in a perspective that those people have never in their lives heard. They hear a lot from lawyers, they hear a lot from policy experts, they hear a lot from strategists. They don't hear from social workers. And we are the ones with our foot on the ground, with our ear to the
Mm-hmm.
pavement. We're the ones that are hearing what communities need. We should be in the room. We should be at the table. So it's been gratifying for me to do that work, and now to work closely with our partners in government, has been really great, is really great. In New York State, it takes forever to pass any kind of legislation, so you get to build really close relationships with these people, but really learn how you can best work together with them and bring that social work lens to the discussion is always incredibly powerful. I love it. I absolutely love it.
What what if advice you would give somebody that wants to, who's currently in grad school right now, that wants to like potentially work in government, like, or work a similar path that you did once you got out of grad school?
Sure. I mean, I think that you need to first off learn. So those policy classes are important. Those social welfare classes are important to really learn what the governmental basis of our profession really is, or really has been, I should say, where it comes from, and kind of what the impacts of all of that are in modern day. So you have to learn. And then number two, just get involved locally. We all live in a community, and all of our communities have leadership. Who's the leadership in your community? And I'm not talking about who's the Congress member. That's not where you start. Where you start is who is your school, who's on your school board, who's in your community board. Who are the local stakeholders that decide, when a pothole gets fixed, or, when does the trash get collected? Find an issue that you care about in your community and figure out who the stakeholders are that are responsible for fixing that issue. That's how I started. Getting really, really knowledgeable and involved locally with issues that I cared about, everything from sanitation to public safety. To here in the Bronx, the opioid crisis. It always goes back to the opioid crisis for me here in the Bronx, because we're really, one of the epicenters, particularly in the South Bronx. So those are the issues that should be taking you to those websites that tell you who is your local representative, who's your local state senator, who's your council member, who's your assembly member, and who are the people that are in charge of fixing things. You start there. And getting involved in community meetings, figure out who the organizations that are doing that advocacy work in your community are. You want to start local, because that's where you're going to learn the different dynamics, who says they're in charge, but they're not actually in charge, who you never hear them or see them, but nothing happens until they say yes. These are the dynamics that are really important to help you kind of build your network and figure out where the decision-making process actually lies, and see how you can make an impact on that.
That's good advice. And even like, politicians that you only see during when it's time for re-election, and they pop out, and once they're in office, you don't see them. So
And
it's
not only that, but who are the people that are doing really great work? I always
mm,
talk about Gail Brewer, because she's been around since the Lindsay administration. She's been
oh
around
wow.
for a really long time, 50 plus years. You don't get to be around that long. People don't keep you around for that long unless you're really, really good at your job.
Mm,
So find out who the people are that are really good at what they do, who and not just the elected officials, but who are the people that work for elected officials that are really good at what they do. Connect with them, invite them out for coffee. Figure out, what are the issues that you have in common. Figure out what value you can bring to that conversation. And I would argue that we're social workers. We bring so much value because we look at things differently, right?
mm,
When we look at a person, shooting up on a street corner, we don't just say, oh, that's just a junkie that's shooting up on a street corner. That's not what we think. That's not how we think. It's not how we were taught to think. We do an immediate biopsychosocial. How did this person grow up? What was what is the narrative of
mm.
brought them to this moment? And what are the strengths that we can find to build commonality and give them, support them in getting the tools that they need in order to get better? That is a perspective that's valuable at every table.
No, absolutely. Any political aspirations for you?
No. I've seen too many sausages get made I'm good. I'll stick with my students. I will stick with my students. I will stick with my advocacy. All the power to folks that choose that route for themselves. I admire them. I think they're a little you know, touched. But that's never been an aspiration of mine. And I find a lot of fulfillment in the work that I do currently. So I think I'll stick to this.
If I were to move back to New York, I'm writing you in for everything.
Please don't. Please don't. Don't waste your vote.
It wouldn't be a waste because if I have the opportunity to write it.
Thank you for the vote of confidence, but no. So I'm glad that they're staying where you are.
I live vicariously through you because I'm banned for participating in any politics. Where can people reach out to you?
So you can find me at the Latino Social Work Coalition. Our email is info@latinosocialworkcoalition.org. My email is president@latinosocialworkcoalition.org, and our website is www.latinosocialworkcoalition.org. It's very easy to remember. But also, follow our work. We're doing a lot with this bill. I want to encourage people to not sit on the sidelines. So if you want to get involved, also follow socialworkersforjustice.org. We have a rally coming up on March 31st. It is a virtual rally. You don't even need to leave your house, but you can come and hear from speakers across different fields and how they are meeting this moment and how we can ally with them as social workers to do this work. So we're going to be hearing from labor, we're going to be hearing from philanthropy, from the politics side, from the community-based organization side. I'm going to be speaking for a bit, and we're also going to be hearing how these different coalitions are shaping up across the country in response to this very a challenging moment for all of us. So I encourage you to come to that. You can find information on that on www.socialworkersforjustice.org. And other than that, just stay connected to the coalition. We're on social media, we're on Instagram and LinkedIn. Follow us, tag us, let us know what you're doing. We're always looking to connect with social workers and partner with social workers. So however we can support you, if you're out there doing the work, just let us know.
Awesome. Keep up the great work. Happy Social Work Month. Happy Women's History Month.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here with you today, Baz. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.